Alright, so we are back working on the Raptor and installing new wheels and tires, bumping the tire size up to 37's. Most people agree that you need some suspension mods to make this work, so let me back up a few years. I was getting a lot of sag and axle wrap while loaded down, and I realized that I needed to upgrade the weak leaf springs in the rear. A local shop quoted me around $1,000 to do an add-a-leaf, but I wasn't sure that would fix my issue, and it was a lot of money compared to just buying a leaf pack. Everyone on the forums had recommendations for various Deaver leaf pack sizes and duty levels, but I didn't want to buy something that was too weak and not be able to correct it, because it's a lot of money. So I went with Icon leaf springs, since you can adjust the pack to meet your needs without concern for mismatched leaves. The springs ship freight and are delivered on a pallet. I decided to immediately switch to option 2, which swaps the light-duty third spring with a heavier one. I threw the pack back together with the new pins that come with the kit. I installed the leaf packs on the truck and lopped off the pins. Then I installed the forged off-road bump stop plates at the same time, since I removed the stock lifting block which had those bump stop plates incorporated in them. At this point I decided that the truck had perfect rake, but I was worried about the differing spring rates in the front and the rear and wanted additional clearance in the front if I decided to go to 37's, so I got Eibach Springs, since they are half the cost of geysers but still better than just pucking it. I lifted the front, disconnected the upper control arm from the spindle, unbolted the shock and spring assembly, threw them all in my wife's car, and drove to the local auto skills shop to use their heavy-duty spring compressor. Then I threw them back together, reinstalled the assemblies, and noticed that the truck was now level while unloaded. This meant that I had negative rake while loaded, and I ended up having to go to option 3, which gave me positive rake while unloaded and made me level while loaded. About 2 years and 20,000 miles into ownership, 2 of my stock KO2s had cracks in the sidewall, which I noticed about 2 weeks apart for them, and I had each of them replaced under warranty. I was very uncomfortable with this because the tread difference of the new tires was about 4/32, which is barely within spec for use with all-wheel drive. That made me never use 4A unless I was off-road, and I only did rotations side to side since I had to keep the much deeper treaded tires in the rear. When the front tires started looking sad near 50,000 miles, it was time to replace all 4 and upgrade the 37's. I went with KO2s because they are snow rated, they're smaller than a 37, making it less likely to have rubbing issues, they're lightweight, and because the KO3s aren't commercially available yet. I ended up getting these about 30% off through AFES, which is why I went with Load Range C again instead of D, since those were 20% overpriced for some reason. I don't know. Anyway, the wheels came in a few days later than expected, and I helped the delivery driver carry them to the garage. All the other parts had already shown up, including the new TPMS sensors, the Apex Rapid Precision valves, and the new lug nuts, which were a requirement for the Method wheels due to their narrow lug nut holes. I immediately checked out the new wheels, which are Method Racing 703s, which have the bead grip on both sides of the rim. I prefer the look of the 701s, but only the 703s, 705s, and 706s come in a plus 25 offset, which I wanted to be as close to stock as possible. The boxes had several warning labels to test fit the wheels before installing the tires, and even though the website said that these would fit, I figured I'd check it out anyway. Now that I knew that they would fit, I needed to install the valve stems and the TPMS sensors, which required a 14mm socket, micro torque screwdriver, blue Loctite, and I needed a heat cutting tool since the new sensors had little wings on either side which interfered with the installation. After figuring out the first one, I pre-cut the other sensors and had to adjust them as I went. The standard size RPV was perfect for these rims because they had space for operation and it doesn't stick out past the rim surface. When they were all ready, I loaded them up in the truck and headed to my local Auto Skills to install them myself. But then I was told that Auto Skills was shut down here, so I called several places, finding only 2 which could handle 37's. I went to the bigger one first and they tried to charge me $50 per tire plus taxes and fees. I even verified that this was the price for just the mount and balance of brand new wheels and tires with no requirement to remove or dispose of the old tires. And they said, that's just the price. And I knew the extra cost was just paying for their massive showroom, the receptionist, and all the sales floor staff. So I decided to give the smaller place a shot, and they got me set up for $180 out the door. I installed the wheels and tires the next day using the new lug nuts and the special lug nut key, torquing the lugs to 150 foot-pounds. When I got to the rear, I had to add the extra step of removing my wheel well liners. I got rub on them with the stock tires at full articulation, so I knew that they wouldn't work with the 37's. I did buy a full set of 5 wheels, tires, valves, and sensors so that I could do a 5-wheel tire rotation. I planned on selling the old wheels and tires, so I dropped the spare and decided to see if I could get the new tire to fit in the same spot. I've read a lot of threads on the forums where guys slightly deflate the tires and then ratchet strap them to the hitch so that it clears the diff. I didn't plan on doing any of that, but I did want to give it a shot to see if the KO2s would fit, and they did not. I used the air compressor tucked under the deck system to get all of the tires up to 38 psi before using a couple of ratchet straps to secure the spare on top of the deck system. The last step in the installation process for me was using the Cobb access port to change the tire size to 36.5 and reset the transmission adaptations to get used to the new tires. Here's a comparison on the old versus new. Both stock rims and methods are made in China. They're both 17 by 8.5. The stock rims are a plus 34 offset and the new ones are a plus 25. So adding the new wheels is essentially like adding a 9mm spacer. Comparing the old spare, which had about 20 miles on it, with the new spare, there isn't really a huge difference. Peak to peak might be 2 inches, but I feel like the shoulder to shoulder on the tread is only about 1.5 inches. The KO2 35s are supposed to be 34.4 by 13, and the 37s are supposed to be 36.5 by 13. So there should be over a 2-inch difference in diameter with no difference in section width. Now, I couldn't find any information on the tread width, but the new 37s seem much more narrow on the tread shoulder to shoulder, like probably about 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch more narrow. I lost my tape measure and sold the old tires before I bought a new one, so I can't be sure, but the 37s have a 10-inch tread width. The weight is what really surprised me between these two. I've never bought rims before since they are expensive and seem like an aesthetic upgrade compared to a performance upgrade, but I got them this time because the methods have bead grip. I could add the apex valve stems at the same time, and because they were supposed to be about 4 pounds lighter than stock wheels to offset the heavier 37-inch tires I was getting. I did not expect them to weigh over 2 pounds less than the stock wheel and tire setup, and that's a fully ready 37 on methods compared to an unbalanced stock spare without a sensor or balancing weights. I can also report that I have had no rubbing issues so far, even with the mud flaps. The deck system and bed cap would fly away if I ever did hardcore desert running or jumped the truck, so I'm not worried about getting to full tuck that often. But I'll do some testing and I'll be prepared to cut and tuck if necessary. I think a quick fix for this might be throwing a bump stop spacer on the rods in the front, but I'm hoping for no issues since the tires aren't full 37s and the high offset will keep me inside of the fender. The last thing I needed to do was test the apex valves, but I wanted to replace my air compressor's Frankenstein chuck with a new one from JACO, which was recommended on the Apex website. I stuffed a 3/8 inch barb into a 1/4 inch hose and added some high flow adapters, and then tested the Apex RPV deflation using the JACO chuck. At first, it seems like the valve release might be difficult to pull, but I realized that a small rotation with the pull pops it right out. Damn. While refilling, I'm sure that the chuck is great, but my air compressor is a Viair 400P, which is only rated for up to 35-inch tires, so this took a very long time to get the tire back up to 38 PSI. Even with 35s, it would take me up to 15 minutes to fill all 4 tires back up, so I will need to get another compressor, and considering doing the DIY onboard air setup with a Napa 10.6 CFM compressor and a 5-gallon aluminum tank mounted up where the old spare used to sit. I'm hoping that this will allow me to intermittently use an air jack in the future. Let me know what you guys think. I'm definitely not gonna buy a $600 dual ARB compressor. I wanna keep the setup cheap, and I could buy a full Viair onboard air system with dual 100% duty cycle compressors for the same price as just the dual ARB, so that doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway, final thoughts. You will definitely notice a difference behind the wheel. I kept telling myself that it's only 1 inch difference in height, but that was enough for me to need to adjust my side mirrors, and now I'm noticing that my headlights are over the trunk of most cars. The Eibach Springs made my ride bouncy in sport mode over gaps and concrete roads, and the 37's have made this even more noticeable, though it is smooth in normal mode. While parking, I notice more resistance when stationary and trying to straighten out the wheels. This could be a new tire friction thing, but it feels more like larger sidewalls fighting the steering rack. As far as performance on-road, it feels slightly sluggish in city driving, but I don't really notice any difference at full throttle. It seems just as quick. Somehow, the fuel economy has actually gone up significantly from 14.8 on average, and that was over 5,000 miles, to 15.6 average. I think I attribute this to less rolling resistance on the new tires, and maybe I'm subconsciously not driving as fast, though that was also the whole point of going for lighter weight wheels and tires, was to, reduce any impact on the miles per gallon and any negative effects from performance. Overall, I'm happy with the setup, and the only drawback for me personally is that my snow chains don't fit anymore. I've only had to use them once over the past 3 years when the trail was literally like 2 or 3 inches of ice with some snow dusted on top. Otherwise, I just keep them in the truck for areas which require chains on hand and don't have the 3-peak tire or 4-wheel drive exemption. Anywho, thanks for watching. I think I have a mix of Raptor and Jeep people on here, but if you're only a Raptor guy, I still recommend checking out the Jeep videos. Working on the WJ has given me a whole lot of respect for the Jeep community, and I'm hoping to build my own one day. But that is it, and I'll see you next time.